Right. Hello, everybody. Um, Excellent. Thanks for the waves to confirm that I can be heard. Cantor, I'm going to make you co-host so that I can easily find you and take you off mute to just give a quick sound check there. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Excellent.
Hello.
Okay. So I'm going to keep everybody off muted for most of the initial part of today. And that's just because we want to roll straight into this, mostly because I have to actually make my first drink before I can have it. And as we all know, that is a significant priority for my agenda on this call, is to be able to have that drink. So first of all, I hope that you have a beverage of your choice, whether it's alcoholic or not is immaterial, just something to share the moment with all of us. Or if you want to get really specific, potentially even three somethings, because what we are going to do is three spiritual pairings, if you will, of a Jewish sort of supernatural story or entity and a spirit, meaning alcohol. And that is the only thing that unites these two topics, is two unrelated topics brought together by one bad pun, which is how I like to roll. By the way, Jewish spirits and the wordplay involved in that with alcohol and supernatural entities is something that you need close to native English experience to understand, because despite planning this for a while, it wasn't until, this afternoon, Cantor, that the pun actually clicked. Since, each new language, you have less and less access to the finer idioms and puns involved. And when you're, by the time you're on your third language, just anything past fluency is icing on the cake. So, but we're very excited. And like I said, the pun is the only thing that brings these two topics together. So the drinks and the ghost stories have nothing to do with each other. They're completely arbitrary. So our first drink, I'm very excited to share, is going to be a Negroni, for which I need to go and get one of the ingredients from the fridge, because you're not supposed to keep vermouth at room temperature. Now, in case any of you are curious, yes, Charlotte and I are sort of like freakishly into all alcohol and alcohol culture, from cocktails to whiskeys to pretty much anything else you can imagine. This is one of our favorite drinks. It's our favorite because it is delicious. We tend to like booze forward, Amaro, like bitter, sometimes drinks. And so the Negroni is a great example of that. But also the great thing about a Negroni is it's very easy to make, and it is very difficult to make badly, because it is a 1-to-1 ratio with 3 ingredients. That's it, and you're done. So I've got my gin, which is the base alcohol, got my Campari, which is the Amaro, the bitter that has the flavor and also makes it a wonderful pink color. So if you don't know better, it looks like a fruity, girly drink, but really it's just like straight alcohol. And then the vermouth, which is your sort of neutral, mixy flavor, mix around ingredient that is in most cocktails. So you can shake or stir this. I'm going to stir it. This nice little stir thing was a gift from my mother-in-law, because she knew exactly what kind of new son she was bringing into the family. And I've already got a bunch of ice in there. So if you've already got a drink made, go ahead and enjoy it. I want to invite, each time we switch drinks, we'll do this. I want to invite 1 or 2 people to share what they chose to bring. And not everyone to share, because we'll invite a couple people to share each stage. So if you're close to your mute button and have a show and tell drink ready to go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us what you're having.
I have bacon flavored vodka.
I'm so glad that chat box was not a lie. And that's kosher bacon flavored vodka, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is totally nasty stuff. Nasty. But it makes a great Bloody Mary.
That makes sense. Our second spirit of tonight's thing also makes an excellent Bloody Mary, which is why I don't have any left, as a matter of fact. As I'm making this, I just want to point out that, like, one of the secrets to any cocktail making is let it sit in the ice and stir it a lot and mix it a lot or shake it a lot. Like whatever the instruction is, just the longer you let it sit in the ice before you pour it, the smoother of an experience it will be. And the more booze forward your cocktail is, the more important that step is. I'm actually going to mute myself as a couple other people.
So on a Monday night, just on Mondays, it's Blue Label for Mondays.
Show up.
I'm doing the Knob Creek.
A little bourbon.
A little bourbon.
We have the single malt Irish whiskey.
Because the Irish are a culture known for the ghost stories.
Absolutely. And I will also say that while Irish whiskey has a huge, huge history, it has only recently emerged as a major whiskey export. Also, is this making too much noise or can people still hear me?
We can still hear you over it.
Okay. So the fascinating thing about the Irish whiskey trade is basically they were in the lead forever. And then due to dumb laws that were put in place, the whiskey industry collapsed in Ireland, and then the whiskey industry in Scotland picked up and stayed consistent all the way through the modern day. And so now that Ireland is back in the whiskey market with not just Jameson, which was the first new Irish whiskey to put Ireland back on the map as whiskey export, they now export like Scotland level excellent single malts. But they're having to break through the market because they had no market, and then their market was singularly owned by Jameson, basically. And including myself, like if you had heard of an Irish whiskey, you probably have just considered Jameson, and that's probably the end of that story. All right, that should be ready. So you theoretically, each cocktail has its own glass that you're supposed to drink it in. Why? Because human beings are snobby and like culture and comfort. This is not the glass you're supposed to drink it in. This is a brandy glass that Charlotte got at some like yard sale or flea market or something that I really like. You're supposed to put this in a double rocks glass, but I found out today as I was looking through our stuff that we only have single rocks glasses because most of the time we drink straight alcohol, which goes in a single rocks glass, whereas a cocktail with ice goes into a double rocks glass, or in this case, a brandy snifter. Now, the other most important thing, if you're making cocktails at home, is other than don't forget to leave it in the ice for a long time, is lean in to the garnishes. Because if you sort of mess up the cocktail, or maybe you don't have the best alcohol or the best, Amaros or the best bitters on hand, literally the thing that will make this cocktail taste the best is taking a lemon peel and rubbing it around the outside of the glass right before I put it in as the garnish. So, l'chaim. Absolutely delicious. That is one of the very few cocktails that I would ever make without using something to measure the liquid going in. But it's like, if it's a little gin heavy or a little Campari heavy, it's still gonna always be delicious. And you have to go way, way heavy on vermouth before something could ever be considered vermouth heavy. So,
excuse me, Rabbi Jim. Rabbi Jim,
yes.
excuse me. Could we please see your ID?
I think I left my fake one in my wallet, so I'm just gonna have to pass on that one. Fun story, in Israel, I'm living in a country where the drinking age is 18, remember, and I'm in my mid-20s, and I am buying wine, and it is Friday afternoon, so like there's no secret of why anyone in that country would be buying wine on a Friday afternoon, and I still got carded. And I was like, this is just ridiculous. So I'm going to, we are going to be leaning into the screen shares for some of tonight, but there's just not really a better way to broach this topic. And as I've gone into it, and as the cantor has gone into it, like we've sort of realized that this topic of Jewish supernatural folk tales or horror stories or ghost stories or ghost characters or horror characters or monsters could be like, this could be a series that could easily take us all the way to the high holiday, because it can be divided up into subsections. You have like monsters, we're talking like Godzilla level, big monstery things that go back into biblical text. That could easily take us through a few weeks. You have anything involving sort of spirits and ghost stories, like as in the ghost of a person who has died. That could be a standalone series on its own. And then, of course, there's angels and demons, which all have roots in our Hebrew Bible, but gets developed wildly in extra biblical Jewish writings from the biblical period, things like the Book of Enoch, but also grown in Christian mysticism and Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, where the angelology and the demonology is just really, that could be an entire year of total weirdness and intriguingness. So we're going to just get a taste of a few different types. So the first is going to be a little bit of an overview, actually, to show that this is indeed a significant topic that includes everything from angels and demons to vampires to Godzilla-like monsters and everything else. And here comes the screen share that will take us through some of these pieces. All right, can people give me a wave or a thumbs up if you can see the screen share? Okay, great. So now I'm going to go to full screen on my end, which means I can't see as many of you. Now, what we're looking at, My Jewish Learning is a very commonly used resource for any general Jewish information. It's not the place to go if you want the super in-depth backstory on something, but if you're looking for the basics from anything like a holiday, a period of Jewish history, a certain Jewish culture somewhere in the world, pretty much any core information, you're going to be able to find a really well-written source on My Jewish Learning that will, and this is most important, have good citations so that you can know where to go if you're interested in continuing whatever you're looking at. So all around, it's a solid resource that tends to come and deliver content from a pretty centrist Jewish perspective. So it doesn't really lean Orthodox, it doesn't really lean Reform, it doesn't really lean scholarly, it doesn't really lean religious. It's pretty centrist in however you'd want to measure that. So this is an article aptly labeled Monsters, Demons, and Other Mythical Creatures in Jewish Lore. And I just want to walk through some of these to give us a tasteful overview of the kinds of characters that we're looking at. We're going to start off with a specific
Rabbi?
demon. Yes.
Rabbi, people are complaining you're very staticky.
Like the audio is staticky?
Yep.
Okay, let me see what I can do here. I can put myself on mute for a minute.
It's good now. Oh, because he's on mute.
All right. Has this made any difference whatsoever? Yes, no,
Yes,
maybe?
it's better, Rabbi. I think it's better.
Okay. Not so much that I can do. I'm using the same setup as far as I'm aware that I use all the time. It might just be the way the internet feels right now. It's sometimes it's just very hard to tell. If it gets bad again, let me know. I'm going to try and keep a better eye on the chat box here. And let me also just double check one other thing. Okay. So when it comes to demons, you might be surprised that it's not just that there are demons in Jewish traditions, but that they have names and ranks and hierarchies. And one of them has the honor of being a cross-cultural demon. So, not to be bound by any one religion. So Asmodeus or Asmodeus, which is a name that anything that we're going over today, here's another caveat I forgot to say, any name or word you will have probably or possibly heard in multiple different places, whether it's books, TV, movies, games, et cetera, because if you want to give your evil baddie or your supernatural being, et cetera, extra character or sort of like ancient feel, while borrowing the name from a biblical source is a great way to do it. And this comes from biblical sources that are biblical in terms of when they come from, and they are written in Hebrew, but they were not canonized. So the Book of Tobit is a non-canonical Hebrew biblical book. The Book of Enoch, the same thing. But this guy actually does make it into some more standard Jewish literature, most notably being referenced in the Talmud. And again, this is why I like my Jewish learning, is because it gives us a citation right there. So if we have more time or we're doing an in-depth thing, we would go from here to Sefaria.org, where you can access the Mishnah and the Talmud and really like get into the backstory of this. But stories where the good guy outwits the devil that are so commonplace, the Jewish version of that story, the earliest Jewish version of that story, is this Talmud story where King Solomon, the wisest of the kings, is able to outwit and outmatch the intelligence of the king of the demons. So Jewish ghost stories, they go all the way back. And if you know an archetype of a ghost story, like the Make a Deal with the Devil one, for example, there are almost certainly Jewish-specific versions of that. So quickly moving on, the Dybbuk, right? This one might be more familiar. There have been movies about the Dybbuk in the silent movie era, early Hollywood, and even a few years ago, there was a horror movie called Dybbuk because it's about possession. And raise your hand, or either literally raise your hand or use the wave button, which is the easiest thing for me to see, if you have ever heard or been told that you are not supposed to name someone, you're not supposed to name a Jewish baby after someone who's still alive. Okay. That is what this specific ghost story is about, because the Dybbuk, in its most Jewish Eastern European version, is, and the word Dybbuk comes from the word to stick. So a Dybbuk is basically the identity, the spiritual identity of someone sticking onto another person and possessing them. And if you name someone after someone who is still alive, you run the risk of that happening to a greater degree. That's a great example of one that we live with a lot. I'm going to skip the Golem because that's going to be our main feature towards the end. This one I want to showcase because I did mention Godzilla multiple times, not only because that is a very important part of my early childhood, but also because there are super monsters in the Torah. Specifically, there are 3. The Leviathan, and then there's a separate land one and a separate air animal. All 3 of those animals are shared across ancient Near Eastern folklore, but in Job especially, you get like this description of a Godzilla-like sea monster, for lack of a better way to say it quickly. And, the Jewish texts tell us that God made these creatures the same as God made everything else. So that's a quick nod to the monster movie fan in any of us. And then I'm going to skip Lilith for now. You have demigods. So there's a race of sort of like supernatural hero people called the Nephilim, and they have children who are then demigods. So Greek demigods, we got them in the book of Genesis also. And then I'm only going to take a quick nod at this, but we looked at Judaism in the afterlife a few Sundays ago, and we looked at the story of the Witch of Endor, where they summon the ghost of Samuel the prophet. And that is like that is a ghost story that is in the Hebrew Bible. Now, I said I'd come back to Lilith and Cancer. I'm not talking about Lilith right before I pass it to you for any particular reason, lest anyone think that there's a connection there, because Lilith is one of the secret wives that Adam had before settling on Eve, according to extra-biblical traditions. And Lilith gets a very, very bad rap for many, many centuries, and has had a resurgence since the 70s as a beacon of finding a strong female character that had a solid origin that was then demonized because she was a woman, and only because she was a woman. And I'm not the expert to teach that, but I know rabbis who have expertise in feminist theology. Lilith is where that conversation often starts. And the thing that I want to tie her into is, I talked about how she was demonized. She's literally turned into a vampire, like a succubus. So if you are a vampire fan, first of all, if you go to, this is just the regular vampire folklore Wikipedia page, and there's a whole section just on Jewish vampires. And one of the specific ones is this, which is, as you can see here, I hope it's clear enough to read, a female vampire variant, which then demonizes feminism, demonizes women having sex drives, it just, preying upon men and like the whole 9 yards. And eventually Lilith gets turned into one of these female vampires. So yes, there is vampirism in Judaism as well. Truly everything can be found amongst our tradition. Now, like I said, that was not a purposeful transition, and yet it'll have to do, because I'm going to pass it over for our next spirit to Cantor.
Okay. Rabbi, this is so fascinating, and I love this program. I would do a program like this every single week. So here is my spirit, and as you probably maybe can imagine, it looks like a monster, honestly. I'm sorry, it's a little bit old, but this is my spicy vodka. And as you can see, it has quite a bit of ingredients. They look a little scary. It is green. Well, it sits here for a while, and I probably should have taken all this stuff out of it, but I kept it because I like it very spicy. And it actually, after a certain point, it doesn't get any spicier. It just stays the same way. So
now I have a question that I know is probably on others' minds. I know it's a secret.
Yeah.
But can you walk us through it all, what's in that jar? Because I'm probably saying something that we all feel is, we only ever see the finished product once it's been rebottled in a pristine way. So I've never seen it in the infusion form before.
Exactly. So first of all, that's how it looks it's kind of greenish, yellowish, and it has a pretty intense color. And this is, by the way, the glass from Rabbi Jim's wedding, which I really like to drink my vodka from. Okay, so look here. Okay. Well, it definitely has garlics, and it definitely has peppers, spicy peppers, and it has, I don't know the name in, I think it's cilantro, but I'm not sure. It maybe is cilantro. Now, the thing is that many people, when they try it, they ask me if I have pickles in it. No, I do not have pickles in it. I think that garlic gives it this taste of pickles. I just want to tell a few words about this vodka. It's actually very special to me. I am, well, drinking it and making, look, I first started to drink it because my dad made up this recipe. Somehow he came up with this recipe because probably he was cheap to buy expensive vodka. So he figured out that if he buys really, there was this kind of very cheap Israeli vodka, which was called vodka Alexandrov. So he was buying it and infusing it, and then it became amazing. And you could never taste the taste of, cheap vodka. So I think from trying to save a little money on really good vodka, he started to make this. And then he was adjusting it and adjusting it. I think he started to make it in the early 90s. Obviously, I did not drink it back then because I was a teenager. But I kind of experienced seeing it. And then at some point, when I grew older, he taught me how to make it. And I started to make it. And we actually used to sometimes drink it together with him. So this vodka is always associated with my dad for me. And then when I met Arkady, we used to drink it together with my dad and Arkady. So it is very special. and we were invited into all houses of Tel Aviv. Like there was no party where we were not invited. We were extremely popular. And until today, I'm not sure whether it was because of how nice and funny and cool we were, or because the fact that every time we would bring 2 bottles of this Alexandrov vodka infused by me. So I adjusted the recipe a little bit as I grew. I only told it to 2 people when I was really drunk in the many years that I was making it. So Rabbi Jim, you maybe have a chance. But
Excellent.
so Rabbi Jim asked me to tell that I actually was intending to, I made it for him 3 times because I promised him this vodka, but in the first 2 times I drank it accidentally. So I could not give it to him.
By the way, that is a completely true story.
It is a true story. So the 3rd time around, I actually gave it to him. He did not love it, but Charlotte did. And he gave me a kind of Bloody Mary mix to mix with it, which I sometimes
Oh,
do.
I can actually grab that right now.
So here's the story. If you ever want me to make it for you guys, it's very spicy, but I would love to. Let's drink L'chaim. Let's wait for the rabbi to come and drink L'chaim. If you have any questions, ask me. But it smells really good. It smells really good. Rabbi has it. So L'chaim. I love this vodka. Okay, so I actually brought a Hasidic story, which kind of mystical Hasidic story that I took out of one of the Hasidic websites, and it is called "Ouch, the Bed Hurts." So I'll read it to you. Yosele, the son of Nezhnitzer Rebbe, very much wanted to have the seer of Lublin as his house guest. So seer is like a prophet. This was good news indeed that reached the ears of Rabbi Yosele of Ostila, the son of Rabbi Mordechai of Nezhitz. He had heard that a celebrated tzaddik was soon to pass through his town and very much wanted to have him as a guest. For this was none other than Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak of Lublin, known as the Chozeh, the seer, on account of his unusual powers of perception. Now he knew that when the Chozeh lay down on another's bed, he would sometimes cry out, "It's prickly." He, the rabbi, therefore summoned to his home a God-fearing carpenter and instructed him to build a bed especially for the rabbi, to make sure that no one else should sleep on it, that he should immerse himself in a mikvah before working on it, and that he should entertain pure thoughts while working. The carpenter was not at all enthusiastic about this or enthused by this odd proposition, and in fact, he was somewhat apprehensive. On the other hand, he could not quite bring himself to reject an instruction given by the rabbi. In the end, he set about the work with a dejected spirit and a feeling of unworthiness, knowing full well who was the holy man who was soon to sleep on this bed. As soon as delivered the finished articles to Rabbi Yosele, the tzaddik stood it in a special room, made it up with bedclothes that were suitable, spotless, and ironed, brought in a chair, table, and lamp, and locked the door. And in order that he should be certain that no one at all would enter the room, he kept the key in his own pocket. A few days later, Rabbi Yosele was overjoyed, for when he went out to greet his distinguished guest, the Chozeh, the seer, in fact accepted his offer of hospitality. He conducted him to his room, showed him the bed which God-fearing carpenter had constructed especially for him, invited him to lie down to rest a little, and left the room in calm satisfaction. "Help! It's prickly!" came the cries of alarm from within. Rabbi Yosele did not know what to think. Perhaps he should offer the Chozeh his own bed, but then it would not be pleasant if the same thing happened there too. Besides, if that were the case, how would the tzaddik rest after his arduous journey? Finally, however, he decided to ask the rabbi to sleep in his own bed, and the Jose agreed. When he woke up, he said, "Excellent, you have restored life to all my limbs." Rabbi Yossele was relieved, but he still had a question. "I was a little surprised, sir, that you said that the new bed was prickly. For a God-fearing man made it especially for you." "Have no fear," the rabbi reassured him. "The bed is wonderful and kosher in every respect. Only one thing, it exudes a smell of melancholy, because it was built during the 9 days of mourning, and the carpenter, being a God-fearing man, was lamenting the destruction of the Holy Temple while he was working on it." So the story teaches us that our thoughts matter, and we can actually transfer our thoughts into our deeds. I just want to say that the Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak Horowitz of the 18th century, known as the Jose Sir of Lublin, was the successor to Rabbi Elimelech of Litzing. So we are speaking 18th century. And he was the leader of the Hasidut in Poland. And that's it. So I'm going back to my spiced vodka, and I'm doing a little other lechaim.
L'chaim. So one of the things that we see with the emergence of Hasidic Judaism is the integration of moving away from huge sensationalist, supernatural horror stories or ghosts or spirits or whatever else, and moving into more like subtle supernatural stories and people. Specific people who are supposed to have these extra spiritual abilities, or the ability to, be a seer or some sort of like light prophetic nature. And they're all sort of based around Elijah, which also means they're sort of based around Jesus, because Jesus is based on Elijah, but that's another thing. So they sort of like travel around with their like mystic selves and have these experiences that reinforce and enrich spiritual beliefs, because the physical world that these Jews were living in was pretty horrible. And that is a great segue to the next thing, but I'm going to interrupt it by saying that I'm not a big vodka person, just pretty much generally. I pretty much only like vodka in Bloody Marys or the one with ginger beer. I'm blanking on the name. Somebody knows. You can unmute yourselves. Vodka and ginger beer. It's called Moscow Mule.
Moscow Mule. Yeah, we were about to say that too. I couldn't reach the mute button.
Yeah. So this is my favorite Bloody Mary mix, because you don't have to make it yourself, and it's amazing, and it's super spicy. And so spicy vodka into a spicy Bloody Mary mix is obviously just better and better, makes even better. Now, to share a ghost story that comes out of that same period that Cantor is talking about, and centers around an individual mystic's supernatural ability to create a saving presence in the midst of just absolutely atrocious Jewish living circumstances. I thought that I would bring in a scotch. I'm sure you're all shocked that I didn't just start with the scotch and then stick with scotch the entire time. But this was a new scotch to us that we found in our local liquor store this week. This is an Ardbeg, and I have the matching, obviously because I'm obsessive, Ardbeg wee dram glass. You can't not see at all what this says on the glass, but it says Ardbeg on the glass. Just trust me on that. And the background for this particular scotch is that Ardbeg is an Islay scotch, so it comes from the region of smoky peaty scotches, where they smoke the barley above burning peat before they turn it into beer and then alcohol, so it retains the smoky, peaty flavor even after it's been turned into alcohol and barreled and aged. But one of the rules of thumb is the longer it's in the barrel, the less smoky and peaty forward it is, and the more it sort of mellows out and absorbs all the wood flavors, et cetera, et cetera. So most scotches that have a number on it, the lowest number you're generally going to see is a 10 or a 12. So if you are a scotch drinker and you think of a scotch that you like, the low number scotch of whatever that family or distillery is probably going to be a 10-year or a 12-year. And so Ardbeg released a 5-year, which I was excited about because that meant that there has been relatively little time for the peat and the smoke to run out of it. And that is indeed exactly how this tastes. Now, I still have plenty of my Negroni left, so I'm not actually going to have any of this immediately right now. So you'll just have to trust me that it's delicious. But part of what makes this a beast, and therefore applicable to share with a story about a beast, is that it drinks like a slap in the face. You know, it tastes almost like briny. It tastes like you are sucking on a piece of lit charcoal, which I love and am very, very excited about, and it's what I like to drink. But the other thing about any scotch in this wheelhouse is whatever the last thing you drink has to be this. Because if you drink this before anything else, everything else that you drink or eat, quite frankly, will still taste like it. So I'm going to put a pin in that and save it for later and turn to our final ghost story, which instead of either of us telling, I actually was able to find a really great YouTube series of someone who has like a doctorate in like monster history, who has created a whole YouTube series of different monsters and everything else. And she made a fabulous one about the golem. And the thing that I really like about this is normally, and by normally I mean the last time I looked for this was when I was looking for some ghost stories for Halloween with some of the kids. And I did not find this video at that time, and I wish I had, because usually you have to choose. Do I want this really well-produced audio, visual, like thing, but it wasn't produced from a Jewish source, and so it doesn't lean into that as much as I would like? Or do I find this thing that comes from a Jewish source or leans into the Jewish source as much as I would like, but it's the production value, let's say, just isn't quite there? This one actually does both. So without further ado, and when I share this, it should be sharing with sound, and I'm going to set it up to specifically be the best for video screen sharing, but it will take me just a moment to set up. And okay, I think I'm ready. I'm putting everyone on mute, including myself, and here we go.
In 17th century Europe, terrible events were affecting Jewish communities. The 30 Years' War, the Cossack Revolt, and the massacres of the Jewish people. They were also accused of blood libel, or the ritual murder of Christian children. They needed a redeemer, a symbol of hope, so they turned back to their folklore and to the golem. This mud and earth-formed humanoid creature turns up in many tales, and not only in Jewish but non-Jewish stories. Golem stories have survived over time, persisting in oral and written folklore. But it was during times of genocide and war that the story of the golem holds the most significance. I'm Dr. Emily Zarka, and this is Monstrum. In Jewish folklore, there are 3 reasons to create a golem: as a way to show one's mastery of the Kabbalah, to have a trustworthy and dependable servant for labor, or to provide protection for the Jewish community. You've likely seen a golem, even if you didn't recognize it at the time. He's taken lots of different forms in recent years, inspiring characters in The Simpsons, Pokemon, Dungeons & Dragons, Arthur, and even The X-Files. But golems can be traced back to 6th century Jewish culture. He's old. Old as dirt. The golem story most widely known is the early 20th century version of the Golem of Prague. In it, Rabbi Lowe asked the heavens how to stop the persecution of his community, and he received an answer: make a golem. To do this, he seeks the help of 2 other rabbis, each born with the power of one of the 4 elements. The rabbis represented air, fire, and water. Clay collected from the river served as the earth element. The rabbis take the clay and shape the form of a man. They each walk around the form counterclockwise 7 times, reciting special letters. The body begins to glow and vapors rise from the form. And the golem opens his eyes, now a living thing. The Golem of Prague is named Yosef and looks human, but cannot speak. Rabbi Lowe tells the golem he was created to guard the Jewish people from their enemies. Yosef has supernatural strength and can become invisible with the help of a special amulet. He completes many tasks, serving as a watchman, rescuing a kidnapped girl, and even summoning a dead woman. The Golem of Prague is only one version of the golem. Others have existed for thousands of years. One could be brought to life by a Jewish scholar, usually a rabbi, and God's name is required in some way to actually bring it to life. You can animate a golem by reciting the proper letters of God's name, placing God's name into the golem's mouth, affixing it to the forehead, or by placing the Hebrew word for truth into the clay body. To understand why the golem is created from dirt, first we have to take a quick look at another creation story, one found in the Torah, the foundational text of Judaism. There it is said that God created Adam, the first man, by forming him from the dust of the earth and breathing life into him. Jewish scholars developed the golem legend based on the Adam creation story. Historians point to a section of the Talmud where a rabbi created an artificial man who was like any other, except he could not speak, for only God could give that power, which explains why all traditional variations of the golem are mute. In later versions, the creature becomes dangerous or hard to control because it gains power the longer it is animated, or it simply takes direction too literally. Looking back to the Golem of Prague, perhaps the singular most important character in these stories, even more so than the Golem himself, is Rabbi Lowe, a real person and noted leader of the Jewish community in 16th century. Interestingly, Lowe himself didn't believe in miracles, condemned magic, and never wrote about the Golem. In 1909, a manuscript supposedly written by Rabbi Lowe's son-in-law was discovered by Orthodox Rabbi Yudel Rosenberg, although it's generally agreed that this document never existed. He then published his version of the Golem of Prague, which became one of the most important golem legends. The late 19th century was the first time the golem became not just a means of labor, but a protector of the Jewish people. Throughout the 19th century, there were multiple cases of blood libel, an anti-Semitic accusation that claims a Jewish person ritualistically murdered a Christian, usually a child. Rabbi Rosenberg was all too familiar with this. There was a blood libel case near Prague in 1899, as well as organized violence against the Jewish people in Russia at the turn of the 20th century. It makes sense that he would portray the golem in his story as a protector at a time when his people really needed one. In 1917, the Golem Legends of the Ghetto of Prague, the next popular text featuring Rabbi Lowe, was published. The Jewish author was part of the community forced to relocate to the interior of Austria after the Russian invasion. Although similar to Rosenberg's version, in this story, Rabbi Lowe is forced to destroy the golem, here named Joseph, because he becomes a danger to the entire city. Nevertheless, the story ends with the golem waiting in the attic of a synagogue in Prague to be reawakened the next time persecuted Jews need protecting. The increase in Jewish migration throughout the 20th century helped spread the golem story. We've seen it in movies, ballet, children's books, and comics. But in each new version, it has continued to change form. The original goal of creating a golem was to make something more powerful than yourself. In most cases, this was not done to oppress or control anyone, but to give the creator and their community agency, even freedom. What began as a way to demonstrate mastery of a religious text morphed into an unintended monster and was later reclaimed as a protector. Golem's story is as malleable as the clay from which it was formed. Hi.
So what you missed there, because I cut it off too early, is her sort of outro message to all of her followers, where she says, Lord Socrates Fancy Pants and I, etc., etc. And Socrates Fancy Pants is the name of her rabbit. So there you go. And so, like, the golem is just a great story, right? And it's so, it is of the Jewish contributions to the supernatural story realm, it is probably the greatest in the sense that it comes up in more non-Jewish places than any other Jewishly sourced ghost story or folktale. And, sorry, the cat's being bad. So, you know, and the great ending of the Prague version, which is the most famous one, is, and the golem's still in the attic until this day. And because the Maharal was a real person, like one of those seers from the Hasidic folktales, right? He was a real person who was believed to have had mystic powers while he was alive as the rabbi. And you could go to his synagogue, you can go to his grave, if you can find it, because the gravestones are like this close together. And that synagogue is there, and that attic is there. So we hope that you enjoyed this. I'm going to stop the recording and the Facebook live stream, but not necessarily going anywhere, because I would love to hear people's three things really is what Cantor and I, and I'll throw Steve in there as well, would like to hear. Number one is, what are you drinking, if you haven't shared it already? Number two is, was this something that was interesting? Because we have a couple weeks before we get back to a Monday, Mashehu, because next Monday is Memorial Day. And as we move into the summer, we want to, once again, think creatively about how we can, you know, create moments of connection within our community. So with that, let's devolve.